Hello and welcome to Pathfounders, the new tech media brand for entrepreneurs, investors and operators with me, Mike Butcher. AI is leaving the chat window and entering the real world, showing up in factories, energy systems, construction sites and autonomous infrastructure. We're talking about AI systems designed to navigate messy, unpredictable environments such as in industrial settings. And that shift, of course, is starting to reshape how capital is allocated. In the first 3 quarters of 2025 alone, physical AI, so-called scale-ups, raised $16 billion, according to Crunchbase. And physical AI, as it's called, is even getting physical in the shape of humanoid robots. The market for humanoids is currently valued at $2 to $3 billion and is even projected to surge to $40 billion by 2035. So today we're looking at a fund that hopes to sit right at the center of that transition of AI into the physical world, backing AI startups in, for instance, industrial infrastructure. SuperSeed is a London-based VC firm founded by former operators, and one of them is joining me now, Dan Bowyer, co-founder of SuperSeed. Dan, welcome to Pathfounders.
Bada bing, bada boom. Loving your intro, Mike. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Well, we'll get to the reason why we're having you on the pod today. But before we get into this, SuperSeed was founded by you and Mads Jensen in 2018. You're both former operators. Do you want to just give us a little quick potted history of SuperSeed and how it got started and where it is today?
Sure. So Mads and I met about nearly 11 years ago. We were working with a mutual friend, helping him with a small portfolio of companies. We both just sold a couple of businesses and we were helping him. I was running a couple of the businesses and trying to do two quick turnarounds within the portfolio. Mads was working with Simon kind of behind the scenes on the strategic side, and we got chatting and working, and as you do, over a pint, and we were kind of just musing, and we were angeling. We just sold, so we were just messing around in the startup world. And he said to me, "Why don't we set up a fund?" So I think between us, we've got maybe 60, 70 angel investments, and it just felt like a natural progression, founding and then kind of learning your craft, and then angel investing, going, "Oh, okay, this works, this doesn't." And then having a bigger pot of cash to go and do that. And we looked at the market, and it became absolutely apparent that no one in Europe really had an operator background. No one had started a business. I think the stats at the time, they're better now, but the stats at the time were whatever, 6, 7, 8% of VC firms in Europe and the UK, and I do include UK and Europe still, have no operator experience, have no founding experience. I'm thinking, how can you invest in pre-rev, pre-seed, seed startups without even knowing how the machine works? And then we looked at the American models, and you look at Andreessen and their platforms and how they supported startups and how they helped them commercialize and open black books. And that's what we did. So we put 5 million quid aside, mainly our own money, did fund 1, went, okay, this kind of works, invested in 16 companies, very small tickets, 200, 300, 400K, very early. In the days, everything's doubled now. So all of the quantums, you can just pretty much double. But in those days, it was, you could take a fairly substantial slice of a business for 300, 400K. And then we raised 50, and then we're about to close another 80, maybe slightly more than 80 in our third fund, which we're just closing now. So that's the, okay. I don't know if that was too long or too short, but that was the genesis.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting. You went from operating to angel to VC. I mean, as you say, in Europe especially, there's very few operators in VC. I suppose the big standouts were the original gangsters like Nicholas Zennstrom and Brent Hoberman. Yes, right. But yeah, very few and far between. And although
more now, which is great. And you're seeing more recycling, aren't we? So I mean, you're on the sharp edge of all this. You're seeing all this recycling going on, and I think 25% of 25's unicorns were in Europe. Forget where they're listed for a minute, but they're still in Europe doing stuff and recycling and spinning out, and I think that's just fabulous. Love it.
Yes, well, Target originally from TransferWise, then Wise, now at Plural. So we're getting these operators back into the system. So
it's important.
As you said, you just launched your third fund with a £50 million cornerstone commitment from the British Business Bank. You're aiming, did you say for 80 eventually?
I think we're going to go past 80. We're capped at 100, so it'll be 80 to 100 somewhere.
Great. And I was really interested. I wanted to dig into this a little bit more with you. I know that you're accredited now by the UK's National Security Strategic Investment Fund. You're very into the industrial applications of AI and physical AI. Tell us a little bit about the thesis that you're doing with the funds, this physical AI mixed with physical environments, and also there's clearly national security and defense implications.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a blurry language set. As in, how do you define physical AI? How do you define AI in the real world? So the way that I define it, and I think everyone has a slightly different turn of phrase, to me, it's the intelligence layer that sits between all of these incredibly smart foundational models and the real world. And the real world, to me, in business being manufacturing, supply chains, energy, construction, all of what have historically been extremely hard areas to automate, digitize, step into the modern world. And now we have these incredible toolkits that will allow us to do that. And we see so many news stories about AI, but really it's all the kind of the cool, sexy stuff upstream, which is whatever Anthropic has done, or the latest fight between Sam Altman and this, and what's Dario, and what's Gemini slightly leapfrogging Opus in the benchmarks. And we hear all these things, and they become, even my mum, who's in her 80s, will talk to me about AI. So it's become very much part of the common language. But really, we haven't actually applied it in business, let alone applied it in business within what I call physical AI, which is this intelligence layer between these incredibly smart toolkits and getting them behind the scenes, transforming how we make a glass or ship a suit or, run a business. There's a whole raft of actual application of technology that's still to come through, even though it feels like everything is AI. It's not. And it hasn't really embedded in our workflows yet, let alone into the deeper, darker sides of our business worlds, which are these energy provision and management and construction, and how we do that on site, and how we build buildings, or how we run factories or supply chains and all that stuff. So that's the thesis of, the other thing just to say to you is, and you probably know this, is we were doing this back when AI was ML. So 10 years ago when Maz and I started investing, it was exactly the same thesis. It was AI, machine learning in business, and, SaaS then, I guess. And now the model has slightly changed, but it's exactly the same thesis. How can you get the smartest technology behind the scenes to improve what we call make, move, and manage? It's the really difficult bits, the tricky bits, where it's normally a guy with a clipboard or a spreadsheet stuck on a Windows 98 laptop in the field. How do we automate that horrific stuff?
Yes, and we saw just the other day a new company in the UK called Isambard raise 50 million to do AI in component manufacturing, and a very interesting model of franchise system. So it's like, AI is obviously trying to get down and dirty into those kind of manufacturing settings. And also, I know that you are looking at things like energy and reindustrialization. Tell us about the sort of the differences, because it's going to be a different ride for you, say, from a VC investing in pure SaaS. Do you feel you've got everything you need to go deep into these different environments?
Well, it's a really hard question to answer. Do we have everything we need? We are still, even with 100 million fund, we are still minnows, right? If you look at the States, everything is 10x across the pond. We were looking at whatever the latest Anthropic and OpenAI raises, and then you look at how much money has been deployed in the whole of Europe. Forget AI, forget the sectors, forget the investing machinery. We're about, our entire European investment quantum is pretty much one foundational model's Series C round. We just don't have the capital in the UK and Europe. we have been just every time we feel like we're catching up, and we were growing 4 times as fast as the States, we've just been punched in the face. And if you look at all the VC firms over in the States, they're not even VC firms anymore. Sequoias, the Andreessens, they're RIAs, they're registered investment advisors. So they can go from early stage, own the field, and go all the way into public markets, and they can follow you all the way through, and they can hedge, they can do a little bit of PE, a bit of M&A of it, so they can do much more than the venture model allows. So Europe has got a hell of a lot of catching up to do. I was looking at Excel. Somebody was posting about Excel today, investing in Lovable, Agora, I've forgotten the other two. There were 4 big firms, but then you look at how many investments Accel have done in that same period of time. They've done like 140. They do like best part of 100 a year. We just don't have that kind of firepower as a venture firm and across Europe. I do believe that Europe has been woken. I do believe that Trump has given us permission, effectively, to go solo and go alone, and he's woken the beast. We still need pension capital. We still need all of these savings pots enabled, like you have 401ks in the States. We still need the institutional and the back office capital to come through. But SuperSeed, as an early stage physical AI investment vehicle, we've got so much to do. How much can we do? I mean, we're going to do 30 companies with this 100 mil. We're not going to change the world, but we are working in areas that are extremely important for the UK. So getting our infrastructure, and if we just get 1 or 2 out of that 30 to make meaningful inroads into how we create energy networks, or how we transform the construction industry, or the planning cycle, or supply logistics for food and ag tech, if we just get 1 or 2, and there are other firms who are obviously now jumping on the same bandwagon of resilience, defense, infra, physical AI, and I kind of bucket them all a little bit in the same bucket. Not quite, but in that same bucket. And we get the follow-on capital, which isn't just the Yanks, so the Series A, B, Cs and beyond. We have no choice. Friendshoring, onshoring, reshoring is our future. Everything else has been thrown up in the air by Trump and Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Gaza, and now the States in Iran. It's just been thrown up in the air. So we need to protect our borders and our infra and our energy supply and our food supply. So I want to make sure that we are having a meaningful impact in all of those worlds.
I totally get it, and there's no getting away from what's going on geopolitically right now. But in the cold light of day, let me ask you: is sovereign technology a thesis? Is it a category, or is it a kind of a meme almost?
I think it's an energy, and we can be either negative, derisory, pejorative about the term, or we can embrace it. Being Brits, will probably be the former. We'll probably be, cynical miseries about it. I still believe that the movement and the energy underneath pervades, and it will, because what's great is that we're speaking to LPs, so our investors in our funds now, and they are having much more emotional conversations than just financial or return profile conversations. So they want to talk to us about, right, we need to support this. We need to step up. We need to get involved. We need to get engaged. That's being an emotional creature. I'm not a pure VC. Being an emotional, that's music to my ears. So it isn't a thesis. I think it's an energy, or a broader bucket of feeling towards something, and then you can pick your strategy or thesis underneath. So many people are now getting purely into defense, including kinetics, which is unusual. I mean, you've seen in Germany, even LPs like Porsche, who were like no guns, no bombs, no missiles, have absolutely gone 180. Same with Deutsche Telekom and a few. And I don't know so much on the UK side, but I think that was almost okay anyway. But in Germany, that was very rare. And they've gone, nope, 180. We are now all in, whether it's bombs, kinetics, drones, whatever we're in. And I know that's a pretty ugly and sensitive conversation. Talk about things that kill people. But it is the world that we live in, and there is a brutal reality around that. So I think, to answer your question, sovereignty is the broad bucket, but there will be these kind of more vertical thesis strategies that will apply like physical AI or resilience or defense or wherever you live.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? And I mean, the geopolitics are inescapable. Leave us with a kind of a takeaway about your ideas about where this goes. You're going to be investing in some humanoid robots, for instance?
I'm not that bullish on humanoid robots. I don't follow Elon's, 3 robots to every human. I don't think that's where robotics will end up. I think where robotics will end up is in factories where have you seen the half humanoids where they've got no legs and they're just arms doing stuff, and you've got the non-humanoids, so the very, very functional, very vertically specific robotics that you wouldn't know, and they might
robotic arms.
Yeah, they don't look they don't look like Optimus. They're just functional things that live on a factory line. I think that's where I'm not convinced that we'll be living in iRobot, where I'll send a message to my maid to go and do the laundry or fill the dishwasher. Maybe I'm not quite there yet. I haven't quite jumped the shark. So no, I mean, where we invest is in the intelligence layer that may control aspects of robotics, or federated learning that will allow them to communicate on the edge, or other aspects. We won't do the physical hardware. The Chinese are doing a fantastic job of that, and there are some UK provision of that, some European provision of that, but I'm not massive on the humanoid robotics. But I do believe that there is going to be, I mean, we've got 50,000-60,000 manufacturing job openings in the UK alone. I mean, how many in the States? I don't know. So, I mean, when Trump is going, bring the manufacturing jobs home, like, dude, look at the job openings. No one wants these jobs now. So I think there is a lot to be done, and we are going to see incredible leaps in efficiency and productivity, and how we get things made and how we get them moved, or the logistics that run them. And that, I think, is an incredibly exciting thing to watch. And then we have to be very, very conscious and very careful as to what that means for jobs, and what that means for the human on the other side of that equation, which is not my job, but it's something I'm very conscious of.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And we're going to have to watch what happens with the roboticization of society. Perhaps it might even help us out to some extent, especially with aging populations and what have you. It would be remiss of me to cap this off without mentioning your excellent podcast, Upside, which I'm a great fan of, and a listener to. Do you want to be the all-in for Europe?
Mads does, my business partner. He's desperate to be the all-in for Europe. I just use it as an excuse to find, meet, and understand and learn about the most incredible things that are going on across the world, but obviously focusing in on Europe and European venture, startups, investing, which is what Upside is all about. Mads would love to be... who would he be? He'd want to be Freeberg? Who's the science guy? I think Mads would love to take that, and I think he sees me as a Calacanis idiot. No, that's fine. I'm not a massive fan personally, but I think some of their opinions are unforgivable. So no is the short answer, but I think Mads would be game.
Well, I've encountered Calacanis a few times myself, and I think you're definitely a different character.
There you go.
That way.
There you go.
Well, Dan Bowyer, who's the co-founder of SuperSeed, thanks so much for joining Pathfounders.